Thanks for having me today. And my name is Gordon, and I'm a future trainee at Baker McKenzie. And also last year, I flew to New York and passed the bar exam as well. So right now, I'm also awaiting admission, probably next year, February, based on the timeline I got from them. Yeah, so basically, I'm sharing like my law journeys and also some tips on training contract application, bar exams on various social media platforms like LinkedIn, YouTube channel, and also Instagram. Yeah, so that's basically my introduction.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gordon. Over to you, Rebecca.
So hi, I'm Rebecca, the BARBRI brand ambassador here at Cardiff. So BARBRI are a leading educational institute or provider specialising in helping students prepare to sit and pass the bar exam. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rebecca. So yeah, now we'll move on to the prepared questions. We had a few questions submitted by the audience and a few questions that were the Law Society committee prepared. So Gordon, the first question we have is, what motivated you to do the New York bar exam?
Yeah, that's quite commonly asked question as well. And for me, I think it's the fact that nowadays lawyers is no longer a very single jurisdiction profession anymore. Because when you look at the fact that even a foreigner who has never lived or studied in the US are able to sit for the bar exam, also shows that we can be more global and international. And it exactly fall within my future ambition as well, because I always want to be a lawyer who is able to practice in different jurisdictions. And definitely during that period of, before I start my training contract is the best way to equip myself with another qualification, because I have that gap period before doing my LPC and things to study the bar and then to qualify there, even potentially before I start my training contract, which is an amazing thing. And I just feel like if you are someone who wants an international career or who wants to work at the global law firms, maybe potentially on transaction, they are multi-jurisdictional in nature, or to be more flexible in terms of your career options, like they want to go to Asia, go to the US, or to stay in the UK to work as a lawyer, then I think that gives you the flexibility if you have that dual qualification or that multi-jurisdictional experiences. So that's probably my answer for that.
Brilliant. And how, I know you mentioned you recently, did the New York bar exam, but how has passing the bar helped you in your career so far, and how do you incorporate that effectively in your sort of job applications?
Well, to be very honest, I didn't expect to use that in a training contract application, because at that time I didn't pass it yet. So it's more like during interview, when they ask me about my career aspiration or about my future goal, then I would definitely mention that I'm also preparing for the bar exam myself alongside with my job application. I think it's more like, the fact that you showcase your ambition, and also you're the kind of person who always seeking to improve yourself. That is the kind of the element that kind of helped me in my application, rather than the fact that I took the bar exam. Okay, so it's amazing. It's not like that. I think it's more like the fact that you use it to show your characters, which is more important in the long run for the law firms even.
Brilliant. So we had a question submitted by one of the audience members, and basically they were asking, can I sit the New York bar with the GDL and LPC LLM? And if not, can I sit it after I fully qualify? And I think that's a question regarding eligibility. So is there a minimum qualification that you must hold to be eligible to write the bar exam?
Yeah, sure. This is also a very confusing question for many people as well. And in order to clarify, of course, like, first of all, the website of the New York Bar Association mentions that you usually need to meet the durational requirement and also the substantive requirement. As for the substantive requirement, it depends on whether the subjects you studied before kind of align with the subjects of a US JD degree. Usually for any common law jurisdiction, that will be okay. But for GDL, that's a bit tricky, because they have a durational requirement, which means you usually need to have a law degree of like 3 years, because a JD in the US could be 2 to 3 years. So it's more like fall within a gray area. So the best approach, I would say, is you need to submit an online foreign evaluation form to the New York authority. And after that, usually within 4 weeks or a few weeks, they will let you know whether you're actually eligible to sit for the bar exam. That is more like a definite yes or no, rather than us kind of guessing, because it's a bit tricky, the fact that you have a GDL, but you also do the LPC, which makes you a little bit like 2 years, but you don't know the substantive requirement, whether you actually could satisfy them as well. And other than that, if you qualify as a lawyer in the UK, you can not only take the New York bar exam, you can actually also take the California bar exam. Those two are the popular options based on the internationality of the city, and also based on, they have always been welcoming foreigners to take those examinations. So you will have one more option, I would say, if you qualify afterwards. But the main problem, I would say, is the fact that you don't have the time to study if you work as a lawyer already, because you're going to be so busy. And it's more like about a time management issue if you do it afterwards, rather than an issue of like whether you can do it. That's probably my answer for that.
Brilliant. So Rebecca, as the BARBRI campus ambassador, what do you have in terms of the eligibility to write the bar exam in New York?
Yeah, so as Gordon's already said, certain state bar memberships admit non-US educated law graduates, and they are New York and California. So in New York, you need to have completed a 3 to 4 year full-time common law degree in the UK, or US Masters in Law to be eligible to sit the state bar exam. And then in California, you have to have been a licensed lawyer in your home jurisdiction and have completed a Masters in Law in the UK. So New York and California are the most popular, as Gordon said, and they're the ones BARBRI lean more towards to prepare you for, because they are really welcoming to international students.
Thanks, Rebecca. So Gordon, other than the fact that you mentioned, most international students are sort of attracted to the New York and California bar, why else would you recommend the New York and California bar exam to students? What are some other features of, getting a New York State Bar a certificate that appeals to you?
Sorry, so do you mean what are the additional benefits for that? Or
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. For me, I always think that even though you're going to work in London, it's kind of inevitable if your goal is to work in a big global law firms, that you will be able to work on international deals. If corporate work potentially, or even dispute, are your expertise or the things you want to do later on in your career, then taking the bar exam will help you in the sense that you can add knowledge to those particular transactions, because you're always asked to deal with external counsels in other jurisdiction. Like, for example, if it involves an American deals, you definitely work with those local counsel very frequently. And the fact that you already a qualified lawyer definitely boosts your reputation in this respect. And also, I think it's easier for you to make the transition as well, of course, because if you work, for example, like not even Baker McKenzie or other US law firm in London, then you could potentially transfer to another offices if the opportunities come up, and you will be the chosen one because you have that qualification. And also, even for secondments options, you also have more options, not only for trainees, but for partners or associate, they have opportunity to work abroad as well from time to time. Then the American market could be an option for you to kind of develop your expertise in other areas, and also to increase the diversity of your jobs and also the tasks you have been working as a lawyer. So those are also some benefits I could think of.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gordon. We also had another question submitted by one of the audience members, and they're asking, did you experience a legal culture shock between the US and the UK, either during your preparation for the bar exam or if you've had any experience working?
Well, I would say in terms of culture shock, maybe the legal system wise, or even the subject wise, maybe the kind of subjects they have been focusing on, like constitutional law or like civil procedure law, because they have so many different states. Different states have different kinds of law. So it's like way more complicated than the civil procedure rules in the UK. So that was like the most difficult part for my prep as well for the US system, because even in Hong Kong or even in the UK, I haven't really studied something like that. So that's number one. And I would say constitutional law is also kind of interesting because, the Amendment right, First Amendment right, that kind of thing, is there are also some very fundamental principles you may be familiar with, but they also have some differences between our system, so that you kind of need to forget about what you learned in, law school, and then to kind of embrace a new system or some new concepts. But I would say more or less the legal concepts are not extremely different compared to all the common law concepts we learned in our undergraduate law degree. Especially, I would say in terms of the work environments, because I also talked to quite a few like US lawyers due to my work with Global Lawyers Connect and also my social media connections with people. I would say definitely New York has always been, for example, one of the most profitable legal markets, not only salary-wise, but also in terms of the kind of deals and transactions, is definitely one of the biggest across every row. And it's also quite a significant margin, because when you say the top city is New York, the second may be London, but the margin is actually quite high. So I would say the New York market is definitely the most desirable and most well developed in that particular, statistically speaking, at least, I would say. So in that sense, I think definitely they were more intense, and also the kind of commercial awareness, I think, is even more valued and desired in the US working environment, due to the fact that they have been working with the firms in Wall Street and those big corporations. So I would say, so that's why I think it's good for students to learn that early on in the law school as well.
Got it. Thanks, Gordon. The next question is a little bit about the exam itself. So what does the bar exam consist of? And did you do a bar prep course? And if so, where?
Yeah, actually, for me, I chose a pretty different route, because I didn't officially do a bar exam course, but I do know people who took the bar exam, and then I kind of used the second-handed material so that I study myself. But I also kind of, because as I mentioned before, some of the concepts are pretty similar. If you want to save cost and you know a friend or someone who want to give you the notes, and I think that's also a good option as well. If you are like financially don't have that many options, then I would say that works for me, because I have like 3 to 4 months full time to study for the bar exam. And I think that's actually more desirable than studying it throughout like 10 months or a year for me, because I feel like intensity of your study is the most important thing in the bar exam. You need to be examined on 14 subjects in total. How can you remember every subject if you don't consistently study them in a regular basis? That's why I value intensity of study and do it in a short period of time, rather than doing it in a long period of time, which your memories will fade away. And it's just not the most ideal strategy for me. And also it saved me a lot of time as well. Before I start my LPC, I have those months I could concentrate on my bar exam study. So I think that was the best option for me. And of course, I also bought some additional material I can find on Amazon. And then those additional resources like past paper question, I probably could give you the name of that book. It's called, I think it's Strategy and Tactics or something like that, 2016, the book I used probably. You could probably find it online on Amazon and any available platforms. Because for the bar exam, I would say doing past paper question is the most important thing. I think I probably attempt like 1,500 MCQs before actually sitting the bar exam. And I think that's the minimum requirement, to be honest, because if you want to really do well and secure a good mark, then that's the thing you really need to pay attention to. And the book I mentioned will definitely help you, because it consists of many past paper questions.
Brilliant. Rebecca, would you like to talk a little bit about the different bar prep courses that BARBRI offers?
Yeah, so BARBRI offer 3 bar prep courses. The first is the traditional bar review course. So that's an 8 to 10 week course, and it's like Gordon said, it's a fast tracked one. So if you wanted to pass the bar quite quickly, you could opt for that one. There's the 6-month extended bar prep course, which is 20 to 25 hours a week commitment. And then there's the 10-month extended bar prep course, which is around 10 to 15 hours a week commitment. And there's options to study these fully online, or you can opt for a blended classroom learning environments. You could go in to the office in BARBRI office, which is in London. They do have them all over the world though, but the main one for us would be in London. But yes, entirely up to you which one you opted for, and there's quite a lot of flexibility and options there.
Got it. Thanks, Rebecca. We have a few questions about Baker McKenzie, Gordon. So one of the questions is, what motivated you to apply to Baker McKenzie, and how did the firm sort of stand out to you?
Yeah, good questions. I think there are several reasons. Firstly, I would say Baker McKenzie is definitely a really international and diverse law firms. Even in my cohort of trainee intake, I can tell there are people from Malaysia, India, Australia, me personally from Hong Kong. And I think it's just the diversity can really be shown by the number of trainees I met at events. And those people actually helped me get my training contract because for example, one day before my assessment center, I literally have a coffee with the trainees at Baker, and he kind of calmed me down. Okay, you will be fine, and then I was fine. So I think that also the element that the people are really genuinely nice, like really is one of the factors that make me want to do that. And other than that, of course, the fact that I want a US law firm as well. And I always think that UK law firms, some of the biggest one, they have a too large intake of trainees, like 80 or 100 people, some of them. That might be a bit too large for me because I also want to feel like more like valued as an employee. If you have that many people, it's very difficult for them to care each and every one of you. That's just like numbers, like it's impossible. So I think US law firm like Baker's maybe 33 people is ideal for me each year. And my current cohort is like 18, 70 people. I can at least know a bit of everyone rather than, have no idea of even some people exceed in my cohort, So that's also reason number two. And the final reason I would say is definitely the international deals and the transaction I can experience at Baker's because I talk to the associates. They even this morning, I have a future trainee talk with them. They introduce different departments for us to choose our seats in the future. And some of the people from the M&A team told me they have deals always involve even over 100 jurisdictions sometimes. So it's just the internationality and the global nature of the work really appeals to me, especially I'm from Hong Kong and I'm an international candidate. And I always want to even work in the US one day as well in my future. So I think it's just those things combined together really makes me want to get into this firm.
Brilliant, thanks, Gordon. So do US firms actively encourage their trainees to sit the bar exam? And if so, is there like sponsorship available?
Well, that's an interesting question. I wish they do. Otherwise, I probably would have taken it later. But I don't think it's a compulsory thing. I do think that it's more like later down the line. For example, if you do a secondment in the U.S. office, and then the U.S. office find you maybe a good candidate, and they want you to work there, and you also want to work in the U.S. office, maybe you can make that transition, and maybe they will also sponsor you for the U.S. Bar exam qualification. However, I don't think it's necessary for any UK-based lawyer. If you have no intention of working in the US, they will suddenly sponsor you because at the end of the day, it's still London deal. It's still the London aspect or the UK English law aspect of a particular transaction. They don't need lawyers to know that much about the US elements because they could refer it to the US office. So I hope this makes sense. And that's just my perception. But indeed, there are some firms actually, I heard that, like some smaller US law firms, they may want US practice even in London because their practice are not that, they're not like full service law firms. So they need the US elements to be here. So that they actually ask some of the future trainees to take the bar exam and qualified as a US attorney, and then to take the QLTS and then to qualify in the UK market so that they can learn both elements after they get their training contract. But that's an exceptional case, I think. Not every US law firm is going to do that, but that could happen, I would say.
Brilliant, thanks, Gordon. Also, you mentioned a little bit about Global Lawyers Connect. For the audience members here today, what was your reasoning behind establishing Global Lawyers Connect and what it is exactly?
Yeah, basically is probably was born out of the pandemic because like people were at home and I felt like I could have done something because for me I'm more like an international I would say aspiring lawyer because I want to have different experience in different jurisdictions, and I also realized that many people want to do that nowadays as well. I know many people maybe in the UK even or outside of Asia or Australia, Canada, even the US, there are many candidates want to work in Europe as well. So I feel like it's good to have a platform, like people sharing their knowledge and experience, transferring to different jurisdictions so that we can learn those, have more resources and people to talk to. So that's why I have currently a Facebook group where we have like over 7,000 people there, lawyers from or law students from different places. They always sometimes make posts about a particular jurisdiction so that they can connect with one another there. And also we have contributors and lawyers writing articles with us about different jurisdictions and how to get into a different legal market. And we also organize webinars from time to time. So basically this is the concept. And I just try to use this platform to help everyone get a more international career nowadays, given, we are living in such a cosmopolitan city.
Brilliant. Yeah, that platform sounds really interesting. One of the last few questions we've received are regarding the application process. So, Gordon, what are your top tips for securing a training contract? I know that's a really big question and there are a lot of elements to it, but if you could quickly summarize, say, 4 or 5 points, what would be your top tips for securing a TC?
Well, my first point will definitely be consistency is the key, because the thing is, you need to understand that unless you're in a really bad situation in terms of academic experiences, I would say in general, the general population, you are able to progress to a next stage if you work hard enough. Because some people, they have good experiences, they don't know how to put it in writing, they don't know how to sell themselves. But how can you improve it? The only thing you can do is to keep practicing and ask people for advice or opinions to improve your application. And after you get past that application stage, you will face the interview stage, the video interview stage. And the same theory applies, because you wouldn't nail it at first anyway. You need to learn the process, learn the techniques, and it can only be acquired through experiences. That's why consistency is the key. If you're consistent for the coming, I don't know, a year, 2 or 3, you will know about how to do well at those interviews. Because I don't think those things are something that you cannot acquire. I think those things you can acquire through hard work and also kind of like preparation. That is the key. So that's why I think consistency is important. If you really want to get into that firm, then just be consistent and keep improving the techniques. And second of all, I would say definitely know which kind of firms you want to work in. If you're an international student, there's no point for you applying for domestic law firms, because they won't sponsor you or their kind of work wouldn't suit you. If you are someone who interested in a specific area, go for firms that are an expert in that particular area, rather than just randomly applying to those firms, because firms know when it comes to interview stage, they will ask you that questions. And if you can't give a convincing answer of why you choose other firms, similar firms, or like why you choose their firm, they can tell you're just making up some random answer. So I think genuinely try to choose the firms based on either practice area strengths, trainee intakes, culture, or the internationality, etc. And finally, I would say just definitely reach out to the trainees or lawyers at those firms for advice, because throughout the process of reaching out to them, you also kind of tell whether the people there are actually at least a bit nicer compared to another firms, because there are some firms you can never receive any answer from any of the trainees or lawyers, but some firms, the people there are just genuinely more helpful. Then you can tell by actually the interaction process. And also you can obtain some information you would not otherwise being able to obtain online. For example, I talked to a particular lawyer or trainee, and then they told me things like, oh, they even have some internal training programs, like they will go to another office for a month or a few days on weekends to have this separate training session with other trainees at this separate office. For example, those things I wouldn't have known by researching online, but I can know by talking to the people there. So try to articulate, obtain those different or unique information by reaching out to them. Those are probably my advice for now.
Brilliant, thanks, Gordon. I've received a few questions from the audience. The first one is, what advice would you give students since jobs are scarce as a result of the COVID recession? Do you have any tips on getting experience to help build a CV?
I think, yeah, probably my best advice I would say for this is just put yourself out there. Like, because in my undergraduate degree, pandemic didn't happen, but I was pretty much unsuccessful applying for many jobs as well. So I need to look for opportunities that are not formal. For example, I just randomly message a lawyer I know in Singapore, for example. He had a law blog, and then I kind of applied to be a case note writer, for example, like to help him write commercial case notes in common law jurisdiction, and I published that on his law blog. It's kind of like a very minor work, but it helps me in some way. For example, in my master's application in Cambridge, because I have that publishing experience as well. Although it's not like significant, but that also kind of demonstrate my interest in commercial law area, for example, because I write notes on that particular area. So even minor opportunities like this, you could get it very easily by just messaging. Although not everyone is going to respond positively, but it's about taking the initiative, and you need to try out everything you have. I mean, because you need to, just go for it, I would say.
Definitely. I think we have one last question, and that is regarding the choice between LPC and BBTC. I mean, that's completely up to different people and their preferences, but to those students out there who are struggling to make a decision, what advice would you give in terms of what they would look at and in terms of selecting a degree after the LLB?
Well, I think that basically depends on whether you want to be a solicitor or barrister, if I understand correctly, because if you take the BPTC, it's very likely you want to be a barrister, or unless you're from some countries like Malaysia, because I know people there, they want to take it for the sake of being qualified and then go back to their home country, then they could use that as a qualification. But other than that, I think it's more like whether you want to be a barrister or solicitor. For me, I was also going through a period whether I want to be a barrister or solicitor. But later on, it was clear to me because I want a more international legal career. A barrister doesn't suit me in that respect, because usually they just practice in their own countries, unless you are good enough to work in international court of justice. Otherwise, I think mostly the lawyers, they work very domestically and kind of confined to their own jurisdiction. And I would say solicitors is a better option for me, because I think I could like practice international work. And there's also this higher right of audience, which allows some solicitor to even appear in front of the court for some cases. So I just feel like that's a better option. So it depends on your preference between barrister and solicitors, whether you want to do LPC or BPTC.
Brilliant. One of the audience members have asked, did you do your master's before or after taking the bar exam?
Sorry. And I think for master's degree, I actually did it. I took the bar exam. Of course, I know. I took the bar exam after my master's degree. Well, of course, because when I finished my master's degree, I also felt like I didn't know what to do as well with my career. Because I think it's common when you just graduated and you didn't secure a TC during your undergraduate degree, then you just didn't really know what you want to do. And yeah, I just make that decision to stay in the UK first to look for a training contract. And I know this is like my end goal, but also I need to kind of look for other opportunities to keep improving myself during that period. So that's why I took the bar exam, because I feel like that would be an additional elements or achievement to my CV. And then later on, it will be helpful in some way.
Brilliant. And one final question we have is, do you have any tips on networking virtually? As you can imagine, a lot of the open days and sort of inside days at firms are being, taking place on Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So do you have any tips on networking on these virtual platforms?
Yeah, I would say it's actually a good thing coming out of the pandemic as well, because in the past, if you apply to open day, you could get rejected. But right now, I don't think anyone will reject you, because it's virtual event. They could accommodate a larger group of people. So I think you should definitely take advantage of that to use those opportunities, especially you have a specific firm in mind. Keep applying to those activities, because there was one time I did an event with bakers and I talked to the recruiter. And they told me, okay, like on the screen, they can see this person and they recognize that person because he always attend their event virtually. So even minor details like that may help you, like in your training contract application, if you have a really specific firm you want to work for. Other than that, I think you need to ask really smart questions. Don't ask questions you can Google online. There's no point of doing that. You can't even put it in your application form. Ask questions, as I mentioned before, about what kind of specific training programs you guys have, like maybe even weekly lunch, seminar, that kind of thing. They have that kind of thing usually for law firms. So you should look for those things so that you can also demonstrate your understanding of the firm in the application form, and put that open day in your work experience session as a standalone session if you want to apply for that firm and that firm's open day you actually attended before. So that will be my general advice for that.
Brilliant. So yeah, you've also mentioned a little bit about the higher rights of audience. Are you interested in applying for that?
Well, I would say, yeah, that would be a bit too far away from me for now. Not at the moment, especially because I'm probably more interested in transactional work. So I would rather work on like transaction or than going to the court for, it's just a matter of preference, I think.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gordon. And yeah, if any of you guys want, more application tips, then you can check out Gordon's YouTube channel. I'm sure he covers a lot of application and assessment center advice on there. And yeah, that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you, Gordon and Rebecca, for joining us.